Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I'm going to follow up on your questions. And as I'm listening to the testimony, I recognize that what's at stake here really is the integrity of liberal democracy in our century. You know, Vladimir Putin and his agents understood they could not compete with us militarily, they could not compete with us economically, and they could not compete with us politically on a fair stage because they've got nothing to sell but tyranny and despotism and kleptocracy. But he detected a little bit of an Achilles heel in the United States, which is our openness, and specifically our openness, our freedom of expression on the internet, which might be the most wide open of all of the forums and media that we have. And so he took advantage of that. And I think everybody here agrees that we were caught sleeping. And there were hundreds of thousands of dollars, perhaps millions of dollars spent to invade every nook and cranny of the internet in order to inject poison into our political process and to try to gerrymander the outcome of our election. Now, let me ask this. First of all, can we do this in reverse? For example, would we be allowed to spend whatever money we wanted, either as a government or private entities in the United States, in Saudi Arabia, in Iran, in Russia, in the Philippines? Do the authoritarian societies allow people from the liberal democracies to access their public with such ease? Does anybody have an answer to that? Mr. Rothenberg?
Well, yes, for generations we did that through the Voice of America and various other arms of the United States government, and did it very effectively.
But what about the purchase of TV ads in Saudi Arabia or Iran or Russia, the purchase of radio ads? I understand there is the Voice of America, which is announced, which is disclosed, and it clearly comes from the United States. But what about the kind of surreptitious penetration of the public consciousness that took place in 2016 here?
Well, history shows us that we have all played games in each other's countries with each other's media for generations. I'm not defending it or decrying it. I'm just stating a fact that I think
well, and there's
no
doubt, yeah, and there's no doubt the U.S. government has intervened to destabilize democracies, as in Chile, as in Iran, and that's something obviously that real small d Democrats oppose and have tried to stop in our history. But perhaps we need some kind of global understanding about giving the people of every society the right first to free and fair elections in democratic government, and then the right to pursue those elections without covert interference by foreign nations. Well, let me ask this question. The FICA makes it unlawful for any foreign national, directly or indirectly, to make a contribution or donation in connection with a federal, state, or local election. That doesn't use the language of express advocacy. It says any contribution or donation in connection with an election. Would it be within the constitutional authority and province of Congress to ban, and I think perhaps the chairman was asking this question too, not just express advocacy spending by foreign nationals, corporations, and governments, but also any political advertising taking place during the election season? Would we have the authority to do that to foreign nationals on the theory that they don't enjoy the First Amendment rights of the American people, or indeed of, I think, even permanent residents of the country, people who are here and are part of the country? Does anybody have an opinion on that?
Well, I think the problem, Congressman, is less a matter of the First Amendment than a matter of vagueness. I mean, as I know you're aware, you know, the Supreme Court in Buckley said that precisely that language was unconstitutionally vague, in the sense that actors couldn't, as a matter of due process, determine what was and wasn't covered. This is the danger with these sort of words like...
Right. Well, we've drawn a line between express advocacy and then just generalized political advocacy, but because the line exists, we've got two separate categories, and our campaign laws apply for American citizens on one side but not the other, but perhaps they could apply on both sides for people or entities, foreign governments and corporations that decide they want to get involved in our elections. What do you think about that?
Well, I think we're already there. I mean, express advocacy is banned by foreigners and foreign governments.
But we want to go beyond that to all political spending during our campaigns. For example, it turns out that the Russian government cleverly got itself involved with alt-right activities. It tried to get involved with Black Lives Matter. It was doing everything possible to exasperate tensions in our country, which we live with to this very day.
I would think the Department of State would have views on this. From the point of view of the First Amendment, that is probably permissible, provided that things are defined in a way that is understandable. And frankly, Congress has a bad track record on that.
And of course, they have the right to speak voluntarily and freely through public platforms where they're announced, and they've got a right to do a Facebook page, which is not the spending of any money. But it just seems to me that when we talk about the expenditure of money in the political system, that's where it gets to be very dangerous, because you can't rerun an election. One contaminated election can take a country down a very dark road. I yield back to you, Mr.